up on this Thursday edition of Newsline at noon, a gunman opens fire in Canadian Parliament after a soldier was killed at a nearby war memorial. The dead gunman has been identified as a man who converted to Islam. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says there was no quid pro quo in North Korea's release of one of the 3 Americans detained in the reclusive nation, but expresses hope for resuming dialogue with the North. Plus, North Korea urges the South to take steps to stave off military clashes between the two sides if it wants to go ahead with upcoming high-level talks. These stories and more on Newsline at noon. It's noon Thursday, October 23rd here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
It's very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broome. We begin with the latest on the shootings in Canada. Police in Ottawa are searching for any further attackers after a young Army corporal was killed and the suspected gunman was also shot dead in the Parliament building during several shooting attacks in the city.
The Canadian Prime Minister made it clear that such terrorist attacks would never intimidate Canada. Kim Min-ji reports.
The heart of Ottawa went into lockdown Wednesday after a gunman shot and killed a soldier on guard at the city's war memorial, then stormed into the Parliament building where he exchanged gunfire with police. Canadian authorities have identified the suspect in the shooting as Michael Ziaf Bibo, a 32-year-old Canadian national who converted to Islam. Police say the situation remains live and they haven't ruled out the possibility that additional shooters could be on the run. The deceased soldier has been identified as 24-year-old Corporal Nathan Cirillo. 3 others have been hospitalized but are said to be stable.
I was just taking off my jacket to go into caucus. I hear this pop, pop, pop. Possibly 10 shots, don't really know. Thought it was dynamite or construction rather than anything else. Suddenly the security guards come rushing down the hallways, usher us all out to the back of the Parliament buildings.
The chaos took place just before 10 a.m. local time as leaders of Canada's 3 major parties were holding their weekly meetings in the Parliament building. Addressing the nation after the attack, Prime Minister Stephen Harper said Canada will not be intimidated.
In fact, this will lead us to strengthen our resolve and redouble our efforts, and those of our national security agencies, to take all necessary steps to identify and counter threats and keep Canada safe here at home.
He added those responsible would have no haven. The shootings came a matter of hours after Canada raised its terror threat level from low to medium, following an incident on Monday in which a soldier was killed in a hit-and-run attack by a Muslim convert. No motivation for the shootings has been identified yet, but earlier this month, Canada announced plans to join the U.S.-led coalition against Islamic State militants in Iraq. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
North Korea's release of an American detainee this week has people wondering whether it came as the result of an agreement with the United States. Well, Secretary of State John Kerry says no deal was reached, but did add that Washington was ready to reduce its military presence in the region if and when the North meets certain conditions. Hwang Seung-hee reports.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said Wednesday that no deal was reached with North Korea in the release of Jeffrey Fowle, but that Washington was willing to resume talks if Pyongyang took steps towards denuclearization.
No, there was no quid pro quo. And we are very concerned about the remaining American citizens who are in North Korea, and we have great hopes that North Korea will see the benefit of releasing them also as soon as possible.
Commenting on the release of the American detainee, the North state-run Korean Central News Agency claimed Kim Jong-un took into consideration repeated requests from U.S. President Barack Obama. Speaking in Berlin, Kerry expressed hopes for restarting the nuclear talks in the coming weeks or months, saying that was the key to reducing the U.S. military presence in the region. The 28,000 U.S. troops stationed in South Korea have remained a constant source of anger for North Korea.
it can come to the talks prepared to discuss denuclearization. And the United States is fully prepared. If they do that and begin that process, we are prepared to begin the process of denuclearization, of reducing the need for American force and presence in the region, because the threat itself would then be reduced.
Some North Korea watchers say Pyongyang released Fowl seeking a breakthrough with Washington. Fowl returned to southern Ohio Wednesday and said he was treated well during his detainment. But still, 2 Americans remain in custody, including Kenneth Bae, who has been held now for nearly 2 years. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
And North Korea is demanding that the South take steps to ensure there are no further military incidents at the inter-Korean border, specifically mentioning that it wants Seoul to stop activists flying propaganda balloons across the border. It says that if the terms are met, there is no reason not to hold a second round of high-level talks as planned. Kim Hyun-bin has the details.
North Korea has warned South Korea that military clashes in the border could lead to the cancellation of upcoming inter-Korean talks. In a statement Wednesday, the North said it was possible to hold a second round of high-level talks, but only if Seoul takes appropriate measures to ensure there are no further altercations at the inter-Korean border. The South has proposed holding the talks next Thursday, but the North has yet to respond, although it had agreed to the meeting in principle. North Korea blamed the South for a recent exchange of fire early this week and questioned the South's desire to take steps to improve inter-Korean ties. The North also demanded that Seoul stop activists from launching anti-Pyongyang leaflets this weekend. It called the leaflets drop an act of war and repeated its threat to fire on the balloons as they float across the border. The South Korean government says it does have the legal right to stop the activists if their actions could potentially harm local residents or their property. Meanwhile, South Korea has pulled down a Christmas tree tower at an inter-Korean border town, removing a symbol that's been a source of diplomatic and military tension since the early 1970s. The North has threatened to shell the tower in the past. The tower, decorated with colorful lights and tipped with a cross, could be seen from as far away as the North Korean border town of Kaesong. A South Korean defense official says the tower was taken down due to safety considerations. But some experts have suggested Seoul decided to dismantle it to foster better inter-Korean ties. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
North Korea's human rights record took center stage at the United Nations on Wednesday, with the then head of the inquiry commission that created the report coming face-to-face with officials from the North Korean regime. The testimony could lead to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and the regime being referred to the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity. Sim Young-gil tells us more.
Intense back and forth at the United Nations, Michael Kirby, the chief of the UN Commission in charge of investigating human rights abuses in North Korea, made his case for referring the regime to the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity. North Korean officials asked him directly what evidence there was that the regime was violating human rights.
That the Commission of Inquiry found crimes against humanity have been committed in North Korea based on the politics set at the highest level of a state. So my question is that, what policy exactly do you mean? And which crime are committed in my country against humanity?
Kirby responded, saying the North's vast network of prison camps were run by the state and that acts of torture, enslavement, and starvation were taking place with their knowledge.
In international law, if those who have the power to stop crimes against humanity hold back and do not exercise that power to stop crimes against humanity, they may themselves personally be responsible for crimes against humanity.
North Korean defectors who were held in prison camps also testified before the UN about their experiences.
They didn't give us food if we were not able to execute the required amount of labor. Many prisoners died of malnutrition.
In February, the UN Commission of Inquiry on North Korea, headed by Kirby, released a 372-page report on human rights abuses in the North. North Korea claims it is the product of political maneuvering from hostile forces, including the U.S. that are seeking to overthrow the regime. A vote for referring North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and the regime to The Hague is expected at the UN in late November. But the likelihood of it passing is in question, as Western diplomats expect China to use its veto power. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Korea's finance minister says Seoul will join Beijing's move to set up a new regional bank to fund infrastructure projects in Asia, but only if the two countries narrow their differences on certain issues. Speaking to reporters at the 21st APEC finance ministers meeting in Beijing on Wednesday, Choi Kyung-hwan said more discussions with China over the governance structure of the proposed Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank are necessary. He added that talks over investment guarantee issues are also needed. China is preparing to set up the bank as a counterbalance to the US-led Asian Development Bank. China asked Korea to join the drive back in July. Now, foreign investors who have been selling Korean stocks recently are snapping up bonds. The Financial Supervisory Service says foreign investors snapped up 2.8 trillion won, or roughly $2.6 billion worth of Korean bonds last week. That is the largest weekly buying spree in 16 months. The total balance of bonds in foreign hands now stands at $94 billion. It follows a global trend as investors are turning to safer assets with the economic recovery slowing down and stock prices falling. Analysts say Korean bonds are attractive to foreign investors since Seoul's key interest rate at 2% is relatively higher compared to other emerging markets. A leading business association here in Korea has released a rather gloomy outlook for next year for key industries like electronics, automobiles, steel and shipbuilding. The Federation of Korean Industries on Wednesday cited the sluggish global economy and increased competition as the reasons for this outlook. It added the weak Japanese yen remains a threat to Korean automakers and shipbuilders as it erodes their price competitiveness. Now on to the International Telecommunications Union Conference, which is currently well underway in the southern port city of Busan, and a new head of the organisation has been named. Current Deputy Secretary General Zhao Hu-lin has been promoted to lead the ITU for the next 4 years. The 64-year-old served 2 terms as Director of the Telecommunications Standardization Bureau for 7 years from 1999. Zhao earned his seat with over 97% of the vote. The ITU is a specialized agency of the United Nations that is responsible for issues concerning information and communication technologies. Well, let's get a check on the other global headlines that are making the news at this hour. For that, we turn to Eunice Kim at the News Center.
Eunice, countries around the world remain on high alert amid concerns that the Ebola virus could spread further. And in the U.S., I understand more plans have been introduced to keep an eye on travelers coming into the country.
Right. You'll remember yesterday we told you about the Department of Homeland Security requiring all travelers from Ebola hotspot nations, that's of course Liberia, Sierra Leone and Guinea, to arrive through 5 designated airports prepared with enhanced Ebola screening. Now we're learning that those monitoring will follow those passengers home for a period of 21 days, which is of course the maximum incubation period for the virus. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said the plan will launch on Monday, initially in 6 states, before extending to others. The World Health Organization is discussing whether stricter travel rules were needed, particularly in West Africa's border areas, in an emergency committee meeting in Geneva. The group did release new Ebola death figures, which showed a spike of 322 deaths over a 5-day period. Sierra Leone's government estimates it's seeing more than 20 Ebola deaths every day in its western eastern regions. Meanwhile, a deadly riot broke out in an eastern town called Koidu when health officials tried to take a blood sample from an elderly woman who happened to be the mother of a mob leader there. 2 people were reported killed. The European Parliament has given a green light to 27 commissioners who will handle the EU's administrative affairs with incoming President Jean-Claude Juncker starting November 1st. Juncker promised to win back the citizens of Europe with this, quote, last chance team, pledging to inject a $380 billion investment package into the Eurozone by Christmas to boost jobs and economic growth. Last week, world markets had taken a plunge on concerns that Europe's economy was closing in on a triple-dip recession. The European Union remains divided by 2 separate approaches to balancing the world's largest economy. Countries like France want to spend more vis-à-vis those who support austerity, led by Germany. Shifting now to the war against the Islamic State group, Iran's leader has vowed to support neighboring Iraq in its battle against the radical Sunni insurgency. Hosting his Iraqi counterpart on Tuesday, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani told Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi that Iran has supported Baghdad from the first day and will remain on that path until the last. According to Iran's official IRNA news agency, Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei confirmed that pledge, noting that the security of Iran and Iraq were inseparable. The Islamic State group has captured large swaths of territory in Syria and Iraq, including the city of Mosul, threatening to expand into the capital of Baghdad.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea, connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on Newsline at Noon with Mark Broome and Eoh Jin-joo.
I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
Market researcher, strategy analytics, said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about...
Now, we apologize for the technical difficulties we had for the report on the new Secretary General of the ITU conference. Now, moving on, we're learning that 4 nurses based here in Korea quit their jobs last week over concerns about Ebola. The Korean Nurses Association says the 4 health workers were working in the infectious diseases division of the National Medical Center in Seoul and had earlier treated an infant from Sierra Leone with a high fever. The baby turned out to be Ebola-free, but the association says the nurses were greatly concerned about contracting the disease and call for enhanced protection equipment for medical workers. The National Medical Center has been designated by the government for treating suspected Ebola cases and has 18 isolation beds set up for possible cases. And in its bid to support working moms and dads and hopefully raise the country's chronicle low birth rate, the Korean government has come up with measures to let office workers strike a more healthy work-family life balance. The Labor Ministry made a pre-announcement of legislation Thursday to allow parents of kids under the age of 8 reduce their working hours for up to 2 years if they did not take maternity leave. Currently, they can only work a reduced shift of 1 year. When the revision is enacted, which could be as early as next July, office workers who apply can choose to work between 15 to 30 hours a week. And the spending patterns of Chinese tourists are coming under greater scrutiny as more and more choose to spend their vacations here in Korea. And a new survey has found their favorite Korean goods and services. Our Kwon-sua tells us what were on that list.
One of Korea's busiest tourist seasons, China's Golden National Day holiday came to a close recently. It served as an important time for Korean businesses study Chinese consumers' latest buying trends. The Korea Marketing Association and China's People's Daily Online jointly conducted an online survey on more than 17,000 Chinese people that found more than 40 Korean products Chinese consumers are most interested in. 18 were non-durable goods like cosmetics, health products, and food and beverages, including Korea's globally popular instant noodles 농심 신라면. Amore Pacific's cosmetic brand Seoul is also very popular among the Chinese due to its herbal ingredients and gold decoration. 10 of the most popular items were durable goods like luxury bags, electronic devices, and cars. Chinese buyers also reach out for MCM bags carried by many Korean actresses in drama TV shows, Korea's best-selling rice cooker Kuku, and Samsung Galaxy smartphones. In the service sector, K-pop group EXO, award-winning drama My Love from the Star, cafe and bakeries like Café Bene and Paris Baguette topped the list. Lotte department store was also very popular. It saw sales spike 87% on year during the Chinese National Day holiday. The Korea Marketing Association's analysis shows Chinese consumers are very keen on gold and metallic decorated products, but do not always buy top-end brands. The chairman of the research team says the survey provides both countries with an invaluable insight into the current market trends. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Now, one of the world's greatest mysteries has been solved. Nearly 50 years ago, the arm bones of a new type of dinosaur were discovered in Mongolia, but little was known about it really, until now at least, thanks to a team of Korean researchers. Our Son Jung-in has more.
In 1965, a group of researchers unearthed mysterious fossils from 2 large dinosaur forearms and claws in Mongolia's Gobi Desert. The pair of 2.4-meter-long bones suggested they belonged to a predator bigger than the Tyrannosaurus rex and named it Deinocheirus mirificus, which means unusual, horrible hand. Nearly 50 years later, a Korean-led team of experts were finally able to excavate the rest of the dinosaur bone and piece them together. The reconstruction of the complete Deinocheirus skeleton measured 7 meters with a series of extra long bones in its back that formed a hump. Researchers think that the long spines may have helped the creature balance and support its huge mass on its hind legs. They also found the contents of its stomach, in which some 1,400 stones and fish bones and scales were spotted, suggesting that the dinosaur was an omnivore that fed mostly on plants and small animals.
The absence of teeth and the fact that the snout bent forward is the characteristic of herbivore. We discovered some remains of fish bones in its stomach, which means they were omnivores.
The findings were featured in this week's issue of the renowned scientific journal Nature, a first for a Korean-led paleontologist team. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Now, there's a very interesting exhibition going on in Korea about robots, and they can communicate and, of course, help people out in rather dangerous spots. But what is the future for robots? And we're going to find out now, because there is a report coming up right now by our very own Connie Kim.
This is a 50-centimeter-long robot. It might be small in size, but it can easily climb up this ladder. Going up the size range a bit, and this larger robot can be used in disaster relief. It can walk over very rough terrains and even over nails.
The final task is for this robot to drive an automobile into a dangerous place and pass the obstacles placed in front of it.
And don't just think of these robots as cold, hard machines. These humanoid robots are even able to make facial expressions. With a bright smile on its face, it looks as if this robot is communicating. Another concept on display at this exhibition is wearable robots. This robot helps patients with paralysia walk on their own 2 feet by strengthening leg muscles.
By moving the healthy leg, it stimulates the injured leg and helps rehabilitation.
Wearable robots can even be used by the military. This robot, for example, takes the vast majority of this 90-kilogram weight off the soldier's back, meaning they can be more agile even when carrying heavy backpacks. These are just a handful of the vast array of robots on display at Robot World 2014, taking place just northwest of Seoul. Around 150 companies in the field are here to show off their high-tech robots to prospective buyers, as robots look set to take a bigger role in all of our lives in the years to come. Connie Kim,
Arirang News.
Good afternoon. According to the traditional East Asian calendars, today is Sanggang, the last solar term of autumn, which indicates the appearance of frost and drops in temperatures. And most parts of the nation woke up to the chilliest morning of the season this morning. But things will warm up as the day goes on under lots of sunshine, and highs will be similar to yesterday. So let's take a closer look. Now, the daytime highs in the capital will be at 19. While Daegu and Busan will rise to 20 and Gwangju will be topping out at 21 this afternoon. Now on to other regions. Jeju Island will be making it to 18, while Daejeon and Dokdo should see highs of 19 and 16 respectively. Well, it seems like we'll have a delightful late autumn weather for the time being, with the highs hovering near 20 degrees Celsius, but daily lows will be on the chilly side, so beware of the big temperature gaps and dress accordingly. Well, that's all for me today. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and let's send it back to Mark and Jin-joo in the studio.
Well, thank you very much for your weather report there, Jion. And those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Have a great day, and thank you for watching.